Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Glad to be back with you. Well, we're very nearly done with our book, By the Shores of Silver Lake by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I believe this is chapter 28 today. It is 28. There's 32 chapters. Moving day. Remember somebody got murdered by a claim jumper? So they're headed out to get on their claim before claim jumper gets there. Moving day. Wake up, sleepyhead, Laura sang out. With both hands she rolled Carrie back and forth under the quilts. It's moving day. Get up quick, we're moving to the homestead. Quickly they all ate breakfast, wasting no time in talk, and quickly Laura washed the dishes and Carrie dried them, while Ma packed the last box and Pa hitched up the team. This was the gladdest moving day that Laura had known. Ma and Mary were glad because this was the end of traveling. They were going to settle on the homestead and never move again. Carrie was glad because she was eager to see the homestead. And Laura was glad because she was leaving town. Papa was glad because he always liked moving, and Grace sang and shouted in gladness because all the others were glad. As fast as the dishes were wiped, Ma packed them in the tub so that they would ride safely. Pa loaded the trunk. They packed boxes and the tub of dishes into the wagon. Then Ma helped him take down the stovepipe, and they put it and the stove into the wagon box. He laid the table and the chairs on top of all of it, and then he looked at the load and tugged at his beard. I'll have to make 2 trips so we can all ride, he said. Get the rest of the stuff ready and I'll be back. But you can't unload the stove by yourself, Ma objected. I'll manage, said Pa. What goes up must come down. I'll rig up some skids. There's lumber out there, you know. Turn this down just a little bit. Yeah, that's better. He climbed into the wagon and drove away. Then Ma and Laura rolled the bedding into tight rolls. They took down Ma's big bedstead and the 2 smaller new bedsteads that Pa had bought in town, and they packed the lamps carefully in a box right side up so that they wouldn't spill their kerosene. Of course, they didn't have electric lights like we have. They had kerosene lamps. Sometimes they're called oil lamps, and you might have one at your house. I have several at mine. They stuffed the lamp chimneys with paper and wrapped them in towels and packed them beside the lamps. Everything was ready and waiting before Pa came back. Oh, excuse me. He put the bedstead and boxes in the wagon and laid the rolls of bedding on them. Then Laura handed him the fiddle box and he tucked it carefully among the quilts. On top of all that, he laid the whatnot on its back so that it would not be scratched. Then he brought Ellen and tied her behind the wagon. Now, Carolyn, up you go. He handed Ma over the wagon wheel to the spring seat. Catch. He tossed Grace into Ma's lap. Now, Mary, he said gently, and he helped her to the board laid close behind the seat, while Laura and Carrie clambered into their places beside her. Now then, said Pa, we will soon be home. For pity's sake, Laura, put on your sunbonnet, Ma exclaimed. This spring wind will ruin your complexion. And she pulled Grace's little bonnet farther forward to protect her fair, soft skin. Mary's face was far back in the bonnet, and so was Ma's, of course. Now, you know, those bonnets had sides on them partway too, and so they got pulled all the way down at the side. It was like having blinders on. You couldn't see very well. I don't think I would have liked them. Slowly, Laura pulled up her own bonnet by its strings where it hung down her back, and its slatted sides came past her cheeks. They shut out the town. From the tunnel of the bonnet, she saw only the green prairie and the sky. She kept on looking while she held onto the back of the spring seat and joggled to the wagon's jolting over the wind-dried ruts of mud. While she was looking, suddenly into the sunny green and blue came two brown horses with flowing black manes and tails, trotting side by side in the harnesses. Their brown flanks and shoulders gleamed in the sunshine, and their slender legs stepped daintily. Their necks were arched and their ears pricked up, and they tossed their heads proudly as they went by. "Oh, what beautiful horses!" Laura cried. "Look, Pa, look!" She turned her head to watch them as long as she could. They drew a light wagon. A young man stood on the wagon driving, and a taller man stood behind him with a hand on his shoulder. In a moment, the backs of the men in the wagon loomed up so that Laura could no longer see the horses. Pa had turned around the seat to watch them too. "Those are the Wilder boys," he said. "Amonzo's driving, and that's his brother Royal with him. They've taken up a claim north of here, and they've got the finest horses in the whole county. By George, you'll seldom see a team like that." With all her heart, Laura wished for such horses. She supposed she could never have them. Pa was driving south now, across the green prairie and down a gentle slope towards the big slough. The ranker, coarse grass of the slough filled its straggling hollow, and up from the water pool flopped a heron with long dangling legs. "How much do they cost, Pa?" Laura asked. "What Flutter budget?" said Pa. "Horses like that, a match team like that, not a penny under $250, maybe $300, said Pa. "Why?" "Nothing, I was just wondering," Laura replied. $300 was so much money that she could hardly imagine it. Only rich people could pay such a sum for horses. Laura thought that even if she were rich, what she would have would be two sleek brown horses with black manes and tails. She let her bonnet fly back in the wind and thought of riding behind such fast horses. Far to the west and south, the big slough widened and spread. On the other side of the wagon, it ran narrow and marshy to the narrow tip of Silver Lake. Quickly, Pa drove across the narrow part and up to the higher ground beyond. "There it is," he said. The little claim shanty stood bright in its newness in the sunlight. It looked like a yellow toy on the great rolling prairie covered with rippling young grass. Ma laughed at it when Pa helped her for the wagon. "It looks like half a woodshed that's been split in two." "You're wrong, Carolyn," he told her. "It's a little house, only half built, and that half unfinished. We'll finish it now and build the other half soon." The little house and its half a slanted roof were built of rough boards with cracks between. There were no windows and no door for the doorway, but there was a floor, and a trap door in the floor opened into the cellar. "I couldn't do more than dig the cellar and put the rough walls yesterday," said Pa, "but now we're here. Nobody can jump our claim, and I'll soon fix things up for you, Carolyn." "I'm glad to be home, Charles," said Ma. Before sunset, they all settled in the funny little house. The stove was up, the beds were made, the curtain was hung to make two tiny rooms out of the one small room. Supper was cooked and eaten, the dishes washed, and darkness was falling softly on the prairie. No one wanted the lamp lighted, and the spring night was so beautiful. Ma sat gently rocking in the doorway, holding Grace in her lap and Carrie close beside her. Mary and Laura sat together on the threshold. Pa just sat outside the doorway in a chair on the grass. They did not talk. They sat looking while stars came out one by one and frogs were croaking in the big slough. A little wind was whispering. The darkness was velvety soft, quiet and safe. All over the huge sky the stars were twinkling merrily. Then Pa said softly, "I feel like music, Laura." Laura brought the fiddle box from its safe place under Ma's bed. Pa took the fiddle from its nest and tuned it lovingly. Then he sang to the night and the stars. "Oh, drive dull care away, for weeping is but sorrow. If things are wrong today, there's another day tomorrow. So drive dull care away, and do the best you can. Put your shoulder to the wheel is the motto of every man." I'm going to put the little shepherdess up just as soon as the roof is finished over our heads, said Ma. Pa's fiddle answered her with little notes running like water in the sunshine, widening into a pool. The moon was rising. The creamy light crept up the sky and the stars melted in it. Cool and silvery, the moonlight lay over the wide, dark land, and softly Pa sang with the fiddle. When the stars are brightly beaming and the sighing winds are still, when the twilight shadow over the lay, there's a tiny candle gleaming from the cottage 'neath the hill, and I know that little beacon shines for me. And I know that little beacon shines for me. That meant that you're always being welcomed home. Well, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house, out of your house, in the day and the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. Good night. God bless you.